It was so good to see you guys all and celebrate and sweat and eat and drink and get airbrush tattoos and find out our future. All of those things. So yes, Joe, we missed you. Joe was out of town, but next year.
I was at a family reunion, hadn't seen a lot of people in a long time, but I will not miss the next one.
Okay, good. We'll make sure to consult you before booking. Next big one like that is the holiday party. So let's talk about what's happening this week. So right after this,
Not much.
no, I know, no big changes or nothing. We have the ALC sponsored client consultations. So this is where they role played a buyer presentation one week, a listing presentation one week. Today, we're going to hear from Kevin Willis, and he's going to do some question and answering about how he works with buyers and sellers. I don't know, maybe just buyers. Buyers today? Buyers today. So very relevant because the changes go into effect Saturday. Some now, some
We've already
today.
started, yeah.
Yes, so we're going to talk lots about that today. But those after this meeting, and then in 2 weeks, we're going to do another one, but they're really intended to help with the conversations around it and just hear from other agents what they're saying, right? Not us talking, but each other. So, and everyone's going to say things a little differently with a little different style. So it's nice to kind of figure out how you're going to articulate things. This morning, if anyone got up early at 6 a.m., there was Gary Keller. There was a live stream of his State of the Market from Mega Camp. It was 8 a.m. Central Time. So yes, it was at 6 a.m. for us. So Cole got up and recorded it for us. So the first hour we could record. So we're going to replay that tomorrow at 11 o'clock in this room. And it's Gary Keller going through the slides of just the state of the market and his thoughts on things. And Gary Keller always has lots of good opinions and foresight. And he will share the slides as well. So all of that's available. Then on Thursday, Joe is featured. We did do a time change on this one. So some of you guys might have it originally in your calendar for 10 a.m., but it's at 11 a.m. Because it conflicted with the commercial meeting. But Joe's going to do a deep dive into the buyer representation agreement since we're using them.
Yeah, this might be a nice piggyback with Kevin's presentation today and then mine on Thursday. So merge those together. We'll do a lot of this in the next couple of months just to see how it's filtering when the dust settles, what you're seeing in the marketplace, issues. We're here to address those and get us through those. So there'll be a lot of training on this stuff coming up in the next few weeks.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So think about like today with Kevin, more about the conversations, Thursday with Joe about the actual agreement and like how you're filling it out and questions on that. And then next week we have for our CE class, we have the LARC class, which everyone needs, even brand new agents getting your first renewal. But it is 3 hours long, right? So it's a required course, 3 hours long. So just make sure to block that. It'll be taught by Richard Mario, sponsored by WFG Title, and they will bring food. So this one will probably be pretty popular. So try to register for this one if you can, just so that there can be an accurate count for food and it's easier to get the certificates out. So, but that should be a good class. And then.
What, me again?
You again. We must really like you. The once a month contract mastery. So this is the class geared towards anyone who has not written 3 contracts yet, 3 buyer's agreements or offers yet, or anyone who wants to brush up and just learn. There's been some form changes and maybe the way you've always filled it out, you've never been formally walked through it. So that is 11 to 1:30, and we will provide lunch, and that is in this room on Thursday. You actually do it, I think, in 2 hours. I think Kelly used to do the 2.5.
I can do the Cliff Notes version, but we want to cover it all in depth and have some time for Q&A and maybe some role playing or scenarios also. So
I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yes. You're definitely like the headliner this month with all the changes.
Well, I needed a few days off to get prepared.
Awesome. Okay, Brian Miner from Homefront. Let's talk about mortgages and loans.
Yes. Okay. Well, where should we begin? All right, well, everyone kind of saw the headlines, hopefully, right? I mean, hopefully your buyers have been seeing the headlines that rates are coming down. Has anyone noticed any sort of pickup in activity or like a willingness from buyers to explore things? Have we seen that yet? Maybe not yet, but the
Some
headlines.
people have. Some people have. I've been talking to people that have said it's definitely started to get busier in the last couple of weeks.
I mean, it helps to get those headlines. It kind of starts the conversation of, hey, is it worth kind of looking at this now that they've come down? It's, all right, maybe the prices aren't so bad, the payments aren't so bad, et cetera. So that's kind of what we need, in my opinion. There is going to be, again, some fluctuations. I think the major move that we saw down, it's like, not last Friday, but the Friday before. The Bank of Japan has had kind of negative interest rates for the last 9 years. So all of a sudden they're increasing the rate to 0.25. There's a lot of carry trade where there's a lot of arbitrage with having a negative interest rate from a major economic force, and then all of a sudden them raising rates. There's a lot of reshuffling that was going on. I think the market has kind of given back some of the the downward moves that we've seen, but it and I'm sorry, I should have gotten the chart. I'll have that next week, but we're still in a very good trading range. Overall rates are down. Again, the cat's out of the bag with at least the headlines and the conversations out there. And now we've got, again, more data coming out. It better be, counter-inflationary for the Fed to really be able to kind of look at that 0.5 point rate in decrease that everyone's kind of expecting. If the inflation data is not so good, it might be just a 0.25 point coming up into September. A couple of other things I wanted to add. If you do have a very good credit score, the mortgage insurance rates right now with certain lenders are really, really good. I mean, it's like $100 for like a $500,000 loan. So, I mean, if you've got a good credit score, hopefully people aren't so super scared about mortgage insurance. It's if you have a good score, it's like next to nothing right now. So, wanted to kind of bring that up in case there's people that are waiting to have 20% down to buy a house. In my opinion, it's kind of a waste to put all that extra money down just to save $100 for mortgage insurance. Okay. Let's see what else did I want to chat about.
FHA is what, a 3/4 of a point? Nearly.
Yeah, right, for the monthly. So yeah, FHA is a little higher, but again, super lenient on the rates. And if you have a low credit score, it's going to be a much better option versus trying to do conventional. But with government loans, you can do a streamlined refinance after 6 months of payments on time. So maybe we got to get into the thing with a higher rate to kind of cover some of those closing costs later on down the road. They allow for a streamlined refinance, super easy on the underwrite there. Same thing with VA and USDA as well. Now, kind of with the buyer's agency commissions here, you can build that in to seller concessions in the form of typical seller concessions. If they're not paying it as normal BAC, we can build that in for seller concessions. VA is 4%, FHA is 6%, conventional is 3% unless you're putting 10% down, and then it is 6%. If you put 25% down on conventional, you get up to 9% seller concessions. So that can work in a reasonable and customary buyer's agency commission, as long as that's kind of standard protocol there as far as like your commission amount, as long as it's not super absorbent commission structure, they can work that into the seller concessions into the loans.
So if they do that, does the house have to appraise for the higher price, or
Yeah, I mean,
it can appraise for the sale price and they'll allow?
When you're getting the
They'll
seller
finance the higher
concessions, the appraiser is fully aware. They get a copy of that contract, so they are aware of the structuring of, hey, we're building in 6% into this purchase for seller concessions to pay for some closing costs, pay for the agent. So they do have kind of that baseline value plus the 4% or 6% concession. So the appraiser is kind of aware. So as long as they can I guess justify that value with comps, et cetera, then we should be okay. It should be business as usual. Now I would say this: if it's a government loan, we need to know that it needs to be in that first purchase and sale agreement. This is how we're structuring it. They don't allow for an addendum later on down the road. If, hey, we need to get our commissions out of this thing, let's do an addendum. They kind of want that right in that initial contract. This is how we're structuring it if we're including the BAC. they're not paying it the traditional way, but they're doing it in seller concessions. I mean, it's all in the same, it comes out in the wash anyway, but if we have to structure it that way, we need it in the original contract. Okay,
Cool.
all right, guys. Yes, go ahead.
So, let me put this into context, because one of the biggest, most frequent questions I get from people about the interest rates is, their monthly payment.
Okay,
Right,
yeah,
so if we're dropping, half a point on an interest rate,
okay,
like, what does that change the monthly payment on, say, 500,000?
okay, let's take a look here.
You can do that very quickly on an app called Calculator.
Yeah,
You just plug in principal, interest, term, and
right,
it'll give you the payment.
yeah, I looked at that and I came up with $100 a month, which is insignificant, right? For people that are looking at, oh my gosh, I gotta spend $3,000 a month, right? They're gonna keep renting.
60, so yeah, 3160 down to 2838. What is that, $300 for a full point drop from 6.5 to 5.5?
Okay, so that's for a full point.
Right,
Okay,
yeah,
So then I'm aware. Okay. Thank you.
So-
So that's still a pretty hard argument then. Right?
yeah, I would say, hey, it's more leverage there with, say, getting that 10 grand back from the seller to be able to, buy down that rate versus the seller trying to drop a price by $20,000 to entice a borrower.
Sure, and there's a lot of other variables, right, and I get that, I wanted to isolate what is the actual interest rate change? And how does that impact the monthly payment?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, and I guess it kind of boils down also, how long is that borrower gonna stay in this new house, right? If they're like, we're never gonna move here, we love this place, we're gonna die here, okay. It's maybe now worth it spending extra to buy down that rate versus this is just a 2-year house, we're gonna move. Okay, don't throw 10 grand at this rate if you're not gonna be there long enough to kind of, see those benefits.
And that may be the difference between the price points that I'm looking at with my clients, like lower, like 250, right, and they're just trying to pay this one.
Right.
They don't really care about 2 years.
Yeah,
They
and
wanna get in there, they wanna start accruing some equity, right, but they have to pay the bill this month. 2 years from now doesn't. Right.
yeah, that time horizon, what they're thinking about there. And then I would also say too, I mean, kind of credit scores, they are really hammering people with the lower score. Sure, we can do the loan, but the insurance is going to be higher. And some of these homeowners insurance quotes, that's a whole other topic of discussion, but you guys are seeing that or not, but homeowners insurance has kind of been rising a lot. So depending on the carrier, depending on, that's why it's good to use kind of a broker to sort out a variety of different insurances. But again, they're just going to hammer you if you've got that lower credit score. So sometimes doing credit repairs might be a real good way to save somebody a couple $100 on monthly payment too. And the mortgage insurance is going to be higher for somebody with a lower credit score too. So, all right, well,
Thanks,
yeah,
Brian.
you go on and on. Have a good day, guys.
You too. For
Yeah,
more
there is a
questions-
very simple app I mentioned. It's Calculator. I think it's calculator.org. If you hit Calculator app or whatever, there's a whole bunch that come up, and I've had to look for it once in a while, but sometimes it's the first one that comes up. And it's so freaking simple. You just plug in principal, term, interest rate, and the payment's right there. So you can play with it and figure out what makes sense to your clients.
Wait, I thought you were being facetious. You were like,
The calculator,
No.
mortgage rate calculator.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's pretty funny. Okay, let's invite up one of our favorite guests, Patrick Tolbert from Verispec, one of our partners, our inspection partner. And he's going to talk about what they've been seeing and what defects can affect the house. Thank
If I
you for
should stand
being
here or there, is the camera gonna see me?
Yeah, it'll
Yeah,
follow
it'll
you.
follow you. Go over there.
Fancy.
Go over there.
Is it like a tracking? Yeah.
I told Patrick, I said, we miss you. We haven't been seeing you as much because they've been so busy. They're doing like 3-day.
Yes, it's good to see everybody. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. I've been doing 3-day almost every day for several months.
Oh my gosh.
And I'm not complaining, but I do tend to get home at like 7 o'clock. It's kind of brutal. But Paul and I were discussing, I'm going to Hawaii for a full week next week. So
What island?
I earned it. Kona.
Oh, I'm going to Maui next week.
Oh,
Well,
I'll
you
miss it.
know, yeah. Okay.
Yes, and we've stacked it with all the quintessential tourist things. I'll be swimming with manta rays and drinking excellent coffee and all the things. So I feel like I earned my week off in August, but I'll be back to it in September. So, first of all, I'm Patrick. I'm a home inspector. I've been a preferred vendor here at this Keller Williams, I think for 4-ish years, maybe a little longer. Longer, 5, 6, maybe. You may have heard of my previous company. It was called Verispec. Now it's called Verispec. Who cares? Different name, same person. I'm here to help you. Cole pinged me a couple weeks ago and just said, hey, do you want to chat for a few minutes at our meeting? On just some general stuff I'm seeing. And so I created just a kind of a series of slides, kind of going a couple of the systems at a time, just to give you the highlights that I'm seeing basically on a daily basis, because I get to go through at least 15 properties a week. There's kind of recurring themes all the time, over and over and over, right? And so first and foremost, I'm just going to say, these are what I'm seeing regularly. And I like a little bit of interaction. So I'm going to just kind of stare at some of you and point at you. And hopefully you have a little bit of insight, something to say. Because I don't like to stand in front and just preach. This is a little bit about me if you don't know me. So this is my wife, Ashley, my kids, Graham and Sloan. That's maybe 2 years old. They're a little bit older and taller. My son is 10 and he's already over 5 feet tall. This is me and my old man. We started this. Some of you might have recognized him. Everyone always asks how he's doing. He's great. He's retired. He plays golf 3, 4, 5 days a week. These are my two, not kids, my pets. That's Momo, the corgi, and Samantha. That's my recent wiener dog. I've been doing inspections for quite a while, 8 years, which I round up and just say nearly a decade. I've done many thousands of properties, including commercial. I'm a certified master inspector, so I like to think that I know what I'm talking about, although I'm definitely not always right. Okay, just general, here's what I'm gonna do. Some general areas, just so you know what I'm talking about, what I tend to find in general in these areas. And then I like to know hard numbers, right? Because when you're trying to help someone through the process of buying or selling, facts and figures or dollars and cents, I think is almost more helpful than understanding anything else, right? Because when we're discussing changing in sales price or asking for credits or repairs, numbers is what people can kind of make sense of, right? If I say there's mold in the attic and nothing more, you might think, oh, that's going to be $10,000, right? Okay. These are the things that I just made for summarization purposes. I, of course, look at way, way more than that. But each of these will have kind of, we'll start with the roof, then I'll show some pictures, talk about it, and so on, and so on. And you notice it's kind of top down, right? Roof, some big systems, the ground, and then things that maybe you can't see. So for the roof, how much does it cost to replace a roof if it's at the end of its life? Anyone? Depends on how big it is, loosely.
Materials.
12,000, that's a good number. Who said that? Yeah.
That's a small house.
Yep, I tend to say anymore, pre-pandemic, you could probably get a roof for 10 grand, right? Anymore, it's gonna start at 12, 15 is kind of a more average. And then, yeah, if you're dealing with a big complex roof or a roof that has different pitches and peaks and valleys and a chimney in the way and skylights, yeah, you can very quickly get up to 15 or 20 grand. And so on a $500,000 house, that's a big chunk. And so this is 2 different roofs. And really all that I'm showing you is this is what it looks like when it's done. So does anyone notice anything on this top picture? What do you see? Like this here, it kind of has a silver look to it, right?
Mhm.
So what that actually is the fiberglass underneath. And so we don't need to talk about how shingles are made, but that's what that is. You have a fiberglass mat underneath, then you have some tar and some sand. And so once I can see the fiberglass underneath, I know that it's pretty much done. And if it's not done today, it's close. And so again, I get asked often, how much life is left? It's like the quintessential question that gets asked about roofs. When I'm walking upon a roof like this, I will candidly, and maybe not necessarily facetiously say it, but 0 to 5 years is a good answer, right? And then I also like to always put the caveat that I will reserve the right to change my opinion when I get in the attic. Because when you're in the attic, you're kind of popping the hood, right? You get to go underneath and look. And if I see stains and leaks everywhere, well, then it's 0 years, right? If it looks fine, it's fine. but 20 grand, let's just call it that for a new roof. This one's not as bad. This one's probably closer to 3 to 5 years left, but it's hard to tell with the quality lost on the projector, but you'll get these kind of silver looks. And if you're standing on the ground and you're showing someone the house, you see the roof looking kind of shiny and sparkly, take a little mental note on that, because it's probably gonna need a new roof. Plumbing. What's the most common plumbing issue you think we see? That would be that.
Drips.
Slow leaks.
Leaks, water. Bad plumbing, yeah. Okay, so these are the initial 3 big issues that I find for plumbing. One, we just had to deal with galvanized plumbing. Yeah, so galvanized water lines, that's what that is. It starts to rust from the inside out. It's kind of like the clogging of an artery. And so one, when you turn that kitchen sink on, it's a little rusty, so you want to let it run for a minute before you drink it. 2, you can end up with low water pressure. And so there are many times where I go into a property and you run the sink, it's fine, but the second you turn on the tub or the shower, you'll see that pressure kind of drop. And so low water pressure sucks. And then 3, when it corrodes and rusts through, that's the equivalent of it's leaking, or it's going to leak, or it's springing a leak. And the rust kind of, in a gross analogy, it's kind of like a scab. So it will rust through, it will leak, and it'll kind of block itself again with rust. And so, again, I love hard numbers. Who's had to get bids for re-piping a house? Anyone?
Yeah.
How much was it, do you remember?
15.
15 grand?
4 years ago.
Wow, yeah, so re-pipe specialists, that's kind of a company a lot of people are familiar with. That's all they do is they re-pipe houses. Pre-pandemic numbers, it was maybe 7,000. Now, yeah, again, I'd say you're gonna get ballpark 10, depending on how many bathrooms, kitchens, things like that. But yeah, it's a lot of money to replace the plumbing in the house. The only upside to getting it replaced is now you bought yourself another 30 years or more on that plumbing. So you don't have to worry about it for a while. They're gonna switch it to plastic, right? This here, this is the drain side. So we talked about the supply side. That's at the end of its life, okay, 10 to 15. These are drains. So again, they look corroded and gross, and this is telling you that it either can leak, does leak, or will leak. This is cast iron. The challenge with someone buying a house with cast iron is that cast iron has a lifespan of between 50 to 100 years. And so sometimes it's still in good shape and it's 70 years old, which is kind of impressive, actually. Something made out of metal. But more often than not, if I'm seeing this, you should be aware, or the person purchasing the property should be aware that it's going to need new pipes. And in a similar price to replace the supply lines is going to be for the drains, right? 10 to 15,000, totally normal. And if you think about it, a lot of times they're changing these things in the crawl space. So you picture your jolly old plumber crawling underneath the house with this much space. You're going to charge quite a bit to do that. Because one, that sucks. That's a horrible job. I would not want to do it. And this is my job. I crawl spaces every day. And then this is just a hideously leaking water heater. I like to think of the water heater, although it's super vital and important, as kind of one of the lesser expensive things to get replaced. How much is a new water heater?
35, 4,000.
Yeah, I like to think, yeah, starting around 2 grand. If we drove to Home Depot together and wanted to get a water heater, it's like $1,000 bucks. But once you pay a plumber to do it, and if he or she is going to do it correctly, which is changing the gas line and the new valves, changing the water lines, new valves, if it's gas and it's got an exhaust hood or a vent, if they do it correctly, you're right, it's going to be 3, 4, 5 grand. Because they're changing more than just old tank out, new tank in. But I could change my water heater for $1,000 bucks.
Question on that. What is the myth of draining it once a year? Is
Yeah.
that something we should do as homeowners?
Totally. Yes. No one does though. So
Correct.
yes, I myself, I've drained my own water heater before. I don't do it annually. My last house I only lived in for 2 years, so I did it about a year in and later. And if you see the water that comes out of it, you might be a little bit sick to your stomach. It's kind of gross. Because in your water, you know, you run the water, you drink it, you don't notice the minerals or the stuff that's in there. But the bottom of the tank, you'll see it's just this slurry of like rust and minerals, and it is gross. And so, yeah, if you're like an on the top, or if you're on top of it, I'm taking really good care of my property or properties, draining it is such a good idea. Also, if you look at your manufacturer's warranty, do you think it says, hey, we're only gonna cover you if you take care of it? Of course. And even that is kind of easily, because in my experience, a water heater, you're gonna get 10, 15 years out of it most of the time. Yes, they fail sooner than that, and yes, I've seen ones that are older than that. But if you drain it, again, I love the car analogy. If you don't change the oil, it will still run. But not for as long, right? And so draining it once a year, yes, I would do it.
So you recommend refilling it too?
Yes, you must fill it back up afterwards.
Yeah,
Yes,
that's,
but
don't forget that part.
what you're looking at here, though, this is essentially like a hose faucet. And so you can take a hose and you go run it outside. Let's pretend this is in your garage. Just run it outside to the curb, and then you can drain your water heater. There are other steps involved. That's literally all that's happening. You're turning the water off, you're draining it out, you turn the water back on, it kind of rinses the bottom of it, if you will. You turn the water off, you drain it, kind of just flush it a couple times. It definitely helps as far as how long it's gonna last.
Oh.
Go ahead.
I just had a bank property down in St. Louis I sold, and the water heater in there was installed in 1963, I think it was, it was still working.
Yes,
Can you look-
yeah, and I will say, I love to give credit where credit is due. And so if there's a house, you're helping someone buy a house and this water heater's from the 60s. Hey, to its credit, it's still here because it still works. Yes, but it could break the day you move in, which for sure has happened to somebody, right? Moving on for plumbing, here's the other big one that I see that will affect sales, right? It's sewer line. So who's had to deal with fun sewer fixes or repairs in a transaction? Yeah, right. They're not so fun. And they're fairly expensive. And so this little graphic's really just showing kind of the more common things you're gonna find with issues, right? So clogs, buildup, root intrusion, cracks or breaks, offsets, which is when the pipe's not lining up correctly. And then lastly, jolly belly, right? It's called the belly because of the shape. The pipe has kind of a sag. And so each of these has different associated repairs and costs to repair. So a clog, well, that's going to be a pretty obvious one. And hopefully we're not going to find it when we're at the house. Although I have. Gross. Buildup, I'd say less of a concern, but let's say you have someone who cooks a lot and pours the grease down the drain. You'll see that in the sewer. It's, you know, just as like this kind of greasy sludge that the camera has to make its way through. Gross. Root intrusion. This is a good one to kind of slow down on because you have two ways of going about it. Who's heard of Roto-Rooter, just as a brand? Yeah, so that company, they come in with a little tool like a claw and it will cut the roots out. But what if the tree is still alive? The roots grow back. Yeah, right. So that's a Band-Aid. That's a lesser expensive way to get it fixed, though. We're talking hundreds of dollars. Or let's say we want to fix it one and done so it doesn't come back. Well, now we're gonna have to dig a hole to the sewer, fix the pipe, whether they're getting in through little breaks or fittings or whatever. And that's a one and done repair, but how much is that gonna cost? Typically thousands, right? The second someone has to dig a hole, the price is no less than $1,500 in my experience, even if it's only like a foot down, 2 feet down. So there's two ways to go about roots. Breaks, offsets, and bellies. The sewer, I always think of as that's one of the most open-ended prices or potential open-ended price or costs to fix, because there's too many things to consider. Well, how much does it cost if it's under the driveway? A lot more than if it's under the yard, right? Because you got to fix the concrete later. Also, how deep is the pipe? That's probably the number one thing that changes the price. If I have to dig a hole that's 3 feet, I'm going to charge you less than I have to dig a hole that's 6 feet. Right? Me and Cole with a shovel, we could spend a few hours and dig a hole that goes 6 feet down. It would be horrible. We would not have a lot of fun, but that's what those guys do. And in my experience, second it gets below 6 feet, now they're working with heavy equipment. Right? Because it's hard to dig a hole 10 feet down. And they're going to charge you accordingly. So sewer line can for sure affect the sale of a house or a property. And the price is open-ended, which makes it a challenge to kind of explain to someone buying the property. Which is why, of course, you just reach out to your contractor and say, hey, how much? They come out, they give a bid. electrical. There's really the big three, so replacing of an electrical panel, to me, these are the things that can really freak people out, because there's a lot of misunderstandings as to what makes a bad electrical panel. I see you squinting, but so these are the three bad panels, which I'm sure you've heard of most of them. Federal Pacific, anyone? Yeah, this is called Zinsco, similar issues as Federal Pacific. And then this one's called Pushmatic or Bulldog, which the Pushmatics are easy to spot because these breakers don't flip or trip like a normal one. They push in and out like a button. And so the house I was referring to that I lived in previously, I bought it knowing it had a Pushmatic panel. I had shorts and electrical issues since the day I bought the house, and I paid to replace the panel. How much is a new panel nowadays? Five's a good ballpark, yeah, so again, pre-pandemic, I think you could get a $1,500 to $2,500 panel. 3 to 5 is what I typically see, and I typically see when we get up close to 5, it's because they're gonna have to bump it up, like if the old panel is 125 amps. Nowadays, we want a 200 amp panel, right? So it's gonna be more, because you're running a really big, thick, expensive cable, 15 or 20 feet to get to the new panel. That wire costs like $50 a foot, you know, and so these 3 panels, does anyone know why these are bad?
They arc.
They arc, they spark, yeah, so what happened when these were all manufactured, or the problem with how they were manufactured, is the way that the breaker attaches to the back of the panel doesn't do a very good job connecting. So electricity is trying to bridge this little gap. And so the panel that I bought that I lived with, when I replaced it, there was little burn marks in multiple spots. And I actually brought that panel in because I kept it. And we did a quick presentation where I showed it to everybody. You can see it as clear as day. There's just these little black like bursts, you know, it's scary. And again, my job isn't to scare people. So I just say, hey, heads up. These things can have issues. To its credit, not unlike our 1965 water heater. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. If this room was full of electricians, probably 2/3 of them would say, just replace it, even though they're a little biased. There's still some electricians though that are hanging on. They're like, hey, there's millions of these panels in houses and they're not all bad. But do you want to kind of risk it? Do you want your house to be the one where you're like, oh, we'll see if it happens, right?
Well, they don't use, they don't make the push button
Right.
anymore, so the electricians are saving them
Yes.
and they're reused, so if you buy, you replace something that's not new, you replace it.
Right. And thank you for saying that. So another great example of, okay, I have this old panel and a breaker fails, and now I don't have electricity in my kitchen. It's hard to get these breakers or replacement parts. They sort of exist. I've seen them on eBay. When I replaced my panel, my electrician said, hey, take it to this company in Tualatin. Actually not far from here. Maybe it's closer to Sherwood. It's called Oregon Breaker. And they buy these old panels and breakers. They remanufacture them to be sold at a later date for a lot. Like a normal breaker is 20 or 30 bucks at Home Depot. These are hundreds of dollars for just one, you know, seemingly silly little part. So again, you're like, okay, I have 2 breakers fail, that's $600. How much do you spend before you just jump right into replacing it and then you're good for a long time, right? HVAC. Yes, there's still stuff that's out there working from the 60s and 70s and so on. When I see an electrical panel, when I see a furnace or an AC, before I even open or look at it, I can almost already tell how old it is by the paint job, right? So if it's green, like avocado green, or if it's tan or beige, it's probably 30, 40 years old. And if it's rusty and hideous, well then I think most of the time you're showing someone a property, they already can kind of tell. And I think it serves you guys to know, just from looking in general, hey buyer, this thing looks kind of old, you should probably be thinking about that. Or if you're listing a property and you're kind of poking around and you notice, hey, Mr. Seller, how old is that air conditioner? Because I see these all the time. And again, to their credit, sometimes they still work. And sometimes they work really well. Because the older ones, you know, it's not unlike they don't make them like they used to. Sometimes that is true, and they still are just out there cranking. But when I see these are considered kind of low to mid efficiency furnaces. The efficiency rating on those things is below 80% a lot of the times. And so let's say it's 75% efficient. That means only 75 cents of every dollar you're paying for heat is actually being used for heat. So that's not cool. A new modern high efficiency gas furnace, you're in the 90s to high 90s usually. And you can get incentives and stuff for replacing it, so it's not a bad idea.
Patrick, that top left picture, I don't know, is that open flame or what?
Yeah, so. I'll give some context, sorry. So Mr. Repairman here, he's pulled off the cover. There's a panel that covers this.
Yeah.
But yeah, what you're looking at, that's the burner compartment. And so I pulled them off. These don't have a safety sensor, so they just keep just like burning gas right in front of you and you watch it. You like the sound of it? And they sound like that. And they kind of like sputter and flicker. And oftentimes on these, you get a lot of yellow soot and like crud because they're not burning very cleanly. And so if this stuff's still in the property, it probably benefits from more regular and consistent maintenance. And so this is my job and this is our career field. How many of us actually service our HVAC twice a year? No, you do?
Once a year.
Yeah, I'm an every other year guy.
Mhm.
It frustrates me when the HVAC guy comes in and I'm not home and he's scaring the crap out of my wife. Like, oh, you gotta get, I'm gonna be here spring before you use the AC all summer and fall before you use it all winter. You know, that's kind of like, do you need to change your oil every 3,000 miles?
Yeah.
I used to work at a oil change place, the answer is no. 5,000. Okay, basement crawl space, so we're getting to the tail end. I appreciate you guys listening to me. Some big old cracks in the foundation and some water in the crawl space. These are the big three things that kind of freak people out. One, what's worse, a horizontal crack or a vertical crack? Horizontal. Why?
Because you got weight shifting on weight
Yeah,
versus just alignment, placed to each other, which are
Exactly.
so much more stable than the shifting.
yes. Horizontal cracks. Let's pretend this is a wall. I took tear a piece of paper. Yeah, so. If it's a wall here and we've got a horizontal crack, it's because the wall is bowing, right? It's being moved in, it's being squeezed by the earth. So it's called hydrostatic pressure. So if you got a big old foundation that's buried underground and the soil is getting saturated and wet, that basically is giving it like a death squeeze. So that's why cracking occurs horizontally. So that wall can fail. You don't see it a lot. Sometimes it's slow moving, sometimes it takes decades, but oops, wrong one.
I have a question. We had some, I forget who it was.
Foundations first, a foundation.
First, I think he's the opposite of that when he was here. I could have sworn he said when there was a horizontal crack, that meant, or if there's like a line or something that meant like it was the way the concrete poured or it was something.
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of variables,
Oh.
but horizontal crack, no bueno. Straight up and down crack, it's called a shrinkage crack. So if your crack is straight up and down, it's because the concrete always shrinks, so it pulls apart. You might have heard or been thinking of, it's called a cold pour. So sometimes you'll see lines or forms can leave lines,
Yeah,
but
okay.
That's what he was talking about, that you can think, you might think it was a crack, but it's really just like a pouring.
Okay,
Mhm.
thank you.
horizontal crack, no good. Straight up and down crack, less of a concern. But there's a line where once a crack gets large enough, even if it's straight up and down, it's now more of a concern. And so this crack, for example, you can probably stick all four of your fingers in there. That's how big that crack is. And so the rule of thumb, generally, it's not your thumb, it's your pinky. So a 1/4 inch crack or smaller is no big deal. I would just seal it so water doesn't come in or critters or whatever. But once it starts to get big enough, water, settlement, you're seeing other issues, and this is just this is just showing you some kind of an underlying symptom or problem. This one happens to be on like a corner, and so that corner has shifted or settled. And then lastly, water in the crawl space. So not so much in August, but 2 months from now, I can guarantee you that at least once a day, I'm going to be explaining to someone that I found water in the crawl space, and here's why. And here's what to do about it. So how much does it cost to fix water in a crawl space? It's open-ended, right? That's the challenge we're explaining to people. It's a lot. Yes, thank you. So it can be a lot. And some people, it's hard for them to kind of understand how or why it's in there. You know, we're thinking, no, it's the water table, like you have some spring bubbling up underneath your house. That's typically not the cost. But it's gonna cost several thousand to fix. It's gonna take more than just some new plastic, which I see some sellers trying to like trick me, like they could hide it from me. It doesn't really work. But this is just a kind of a hideous example, right? This has no plastic. So what's happened is this is just water standing down there. And sometimes you'll see water lines kind of coming up high, which tells you a lot of water gets in. But we're looking for signs like, hey, does the ground outside slope towards the foundation? Or does it slope away? Because that's going to contribute to it. Do the downspouts kick the water far out in the way, or do they go into an underground drain? Or are they just dumping water right next to the foundation? Sometimes it's a really obvious answer to the question. But the price, what's the highest crawl space bid you've ever seen for water?
25.
The lowest. $2,000.
Well, no, for puddles, you mean?
Yeah, or just, what if they had to put a sump pump in?
1,500 is probably the
Yeah.
lowest, maybe.
So,
That's easy.
$1,500
1,500 is easy.
Or 25,000, so that range is so variable. That I can't answer that question.
I had one years ago, you'd appreciate this, in West Lynn. And I walked around the house and there was white effervescence all over the foundation. I thought, what is that? I don't see that. So with the owner, we went in the house and I said, well, let's look down there. And he lifted the crawl space hatch and the water was up into the floor joist. It was basically in a pool under the house. Water had been draining in. There was no way to get out and it came up. And it was at the floor joist. It was like you could touch it right underneath the hatch. Oh my God. So we had to do some really quick stuff.
Yeah, that's intense.
Mm.
I've seen similar things, and one of the home inspectors that I used to work with, he would candidly say, I didn't bring my scuba gear today. Like, if there's that much water, I'm not gonna wade through. I'm not swimming in the crawl space. I'm gonna look in there and be like, I need a guy to come out, sort it out. I'll go back though.
Yeah.
Okay, lastly, attic. What's the big problem in attics that we find almost every day?
Mold.
Yeah. Isn't that big of a deal?
Yeah.
Yeah, how much does it cost to fix though? $1,500 to $2,500 all day. In that case, it's kind of not a big deal in terms of cost, right? They're gonna go up there, they're gonna spray a chemical on it, it's basically bleach, got a few more things in there. Now the mold's gone. Then what do they do? They fix the underlying cause, which is usually not enough ventilation, right? Often people will misunderstand mold all day, every day. Because they're thinking, oh, we have leaks, we have water getting in, it's rotting out the wood. That's not really even what we're talking about here. It's a reasonable thing to think of though, because they see on the news, someone finding black mold behind drywall because something is from a leak. This is different. Attics by themselves are already kind of weird little cramped spots, and it's hard to get air to circulate. And so usually what's happening is it's just moisture from the house that evaporates up through the attic, and then it just sort of sits on the plywood. And so that's what mold in the attic is. Attics, unless it's a very old house, always have ventilation. Whether it's enough is another story. But for $1,500 all day long, someone will remediate the mold, and for a little bit more, they're going to fix the root cause so that it doesn't come back. They're going to add vents.
Looks like there's a Bluebird exhaust in that one of the limit.
Yeah, so this one has gable vents, which is, if you got a triangle roof, there's a vent cut in the side so air goes this way. But sometimes that's not doing enough. It's hard to get air to go exactly the way you want. And it has exhaust vents up here. And so sometimes having more than one type will actually make it not vent, because then the air just kind of moves around and never actually gets out. This is a more modern house where you're usually gonna have soffit vents here where air comes in. And then you're gonna have hooded roof vents or ridge vents on the top where air gets out. And it's all about just getting air to move, right? But the M word, mold, scares people. They can totally misunderstand. They can get totally freaked out. They think of it as like a major red flag. I've heard people say, I don't want to buy the house if you find mold before I even walk through the front door. And in my head, I'm thinking, I'm almost certainly going to find mold in this house. And so that's where it comes down to communication, right? And setting expectations. And if anything you gather from this today, set your buyer's expectations before you even cross the threshold of the front door, and you will lose fewer sales, right? If you say before the inspection starts, hey, heads up, Patrick, he's a really great guy, he's an awesome inspector, I refer him to all my clients. he's probably gonna find a few things. Don't freak out, anything can be fixed, there's probably gonna be mold in the attic. It might be $1,500, $2,000, don't worry. He might find water in the crawl space, it is October, we've experienced 14 inches of rain in the last 2 weeks. It's okay, like all these things, setting expectations, I suspect you guys know. You will save yourself so much headache, and you will also make my job easier. Because if I say, hey, I found some mold in the attic today, they'll say, oh yeah, the lawyer told us you might find that. Cool.
And I would just add one thing,
Yeah.
especially if you have out-of-state buyers that are coming into Oregon,
Mm.
California, Texas, Arizona. They don't understand this at all. And the realtors generally don't do what he said and coach them. And so, when times slow down and you don't have as many things happening and the buyers aren't lined up to buy your houses, they're taking longer, the sellers are frustrated. It's really helpful to make sure that you either have the seller go look for these, or you have Patrick go look for these before the buyer even comes to the house. Or I've even had conversations as a listing agent with the selling agent to say, have you talked to them about the fact that we have a lot of houses with water, standing water in the crawl space and mold in the attic or mold in the crawl space, just to warn them, because it could be there. We haven't been there. And it usually helps.
There's no silver bullet. I so appreciate that. Out of state buyers, Californians, Texans and Arizonans, they're more worried about termites than anything
Yeah.
else.
Hmm.
And I'll just say, what we lack in termites, we make up for in mold and water. Cause then they can kind of like click like, oh, regionally, I get it.
Mm.
We do have termites here, by the way. Not very many. Okay, lastly is environmental, and then I'm done. These are things you can't really see. So what's that? Popcorn ceilings, which may contain,
This one's.
thank you, yep,
Right.
radon mitigation system. You usually don't see it in this, but you know what that is?
UST.
Underground storage tank, yep, oil tank that's buried. You can't see it, but this day they're actually pulling it out. So I don't do oil tank sweeps, just FYI, but you can't see it. Unless you do the scan, you won't find it. Radon, you can't see it, smell it, taste it, hear it. Unless you do a test, you won't know. For $150, totally worth it. Mitigation system, $1,500, $2,500 now. Asbestos. Looking at a popcorn ceiling, I cannot tell if it has asbestos in it, but it's possible. I took a sample in a beautiful house in Lake Oswego, right down the street from one of the modern. Did anyone do the modern house tour this year? Like, anyone? It was sick. There was a house off of Key Lock Road. People who own Vanilla Wood, remember that? Anyone?
Mm-mm.
It was the most stunning property ever. Anyways, a few blocks down, almost more like 4 houses down, vermiculite insulation in the attic. The buyers are buying it for 2.5. They're gonna probably do another 500,000 just to move in. I found asbestos insulation in the attic, so I took a sample and took it to the lab, and then there you go. You need to test it to know if it contains it, is my point. Same day reports, free infrared scanning, money back guarantee. Home, radon, sewer. I also can do lead, mold, and asbestos testing. I also do quite a bit of commercial inspection. I have an insurance rider that protects you for referring me. So let's say your client is a lawyer, if you're worried about it, my insurance will protect you for referring me. I go Portland to Salem, hood to coast. Another one of my inspectors goes up to Washington, so I can help you there. I would love to work together. Thank you for listening. We're getting to know everybody if I don't know you.
I guess what are like the common issues that you typically find in an inspection to prepare buyers for? And then what would you just ballpark a price range so that we can kind of tee somebody up to get the home inspection, expect, $700?
Yes, so. I would say almost every buyer could do a home inspection, radon test, and a sewer scope. Those are your 3 basic things to do. Base fee for a home inspection is $430-ish, $450. Radon's $150, sewer's $150. We give a bundle price. So yeah, between $600 and $700, you should be able to get your inspections done. And then your first question was, what are you finding, like problems or?
Yeah, I guess what are the commonly found issues that you're coming across?
Basically everything on here. I would say the 3 that I find that no one can ever see from walking into the house is the mold in the attic, the water in the crawl space, and the problem with the sewer. Those are the big 3. And so if you just ping someone and just say, hey, we couldn't go in the attic, homeowner, you shouldn't go in the attic. He's probably gonna find mold, he's probably gonna find water, it's just. Each of those things, though, you could bundle all of it and have it fixed for 10 grand and move on. So, yeah. I find hundreds of issues with basically every house, with the doorknobs loose, that moves to the bottom of the priority list. I mean, it goes in the report, but yeah, thank you for asking that, $600-700, you should be able to get basically everything done.
Thanks, Patrick. We appreciate you so much.
One last
And-
question.
Oh, okay. From you?
How many people know what the infrared scanning is for? Raise your hand. A lot of people know.
Yeah, so an infrared camera, the misunderstanding for infrared is I cannot see through the wall. What I can actually see is temperature differences, and so anytime I suspect moisture and intrusion, whether it be on a ceiling, a wall, in an attic, or things like that. If it's a cold, rainy day and I'm inside, it's gonna show me a cold spot on the ceiling. I will also use it to verify that heating and cooling things are working or appliances are working. So we'll put all of those photos in the report, and it helps people understand. Oh, he was looking a little harder than he had to, because I'm not required to carry these cameras or use them. Some inspectors don't use them because they are scared of liability, but I like to think it gives me less liability because I'm looking more.
Awesome. Well, we appreciate you.
I've got
That's
that business
great.
cards, and I'll stop
Yeah.
laying up a little bit.
Thank you.
All right, we're gonna switch gears and talk about some NAR changes.
All right.
Good job.
Today is the beginning of a new tomorrow with the 13th, where RMLS is starting to eliminate the BAC in certain fields within the listings where you can search for agents and historical BAC and things like that to kind of get your head wrapped around maybe where a seller might be coming from and how you want to begin in negotiations. So we're going to do a lot of reminders here, especially on this timeline, because obviously RMLS is ahead of the curve for NAR. And we want to talk about your representation agreements with each side of the transaction, your listing side, obviously your buyer representation side. So how do we handle those documents before the 17th? So we've got a few days yet. So let's look at amending your current contracts. These are your listing contracts that are not pending right now, okay? So the agreements must state predominantly that broker commissions are not set by law and they are fully negotiable. And you're going to see that statement in so many documents coming into the future, okay? And that's really the key thing with NAR and DOJ, that all commissions are negotiable and are not set by law. So memorize that. That would have been a nice tattoo you could have gotten Friday afternoon on your arm here. So, and then those agreements, those listing agreements should include the following. If there's a co-op compensation that will occur, disclosure to the seller in amount or rate, okay? Now, these are things that can go in the additional provisions. So you're gonna have a pretty good in-depth conversation with your seller as to how you want to handle offers coming into the future. How do we want to handle this? Do you want to allow me as your listing agent to be able to disclose a certain amount, a flat amount, a percentage, a flexible amount, up to? Or should we just wait and see what comes in an offer? So you need to have that conversation. Please notate that someplace in that listing agreement, what that conversation is. Seller has decided they will offer 2.5 or up to 2.5, or seller will wait to see what is included in an offer. And again, whatever that offer is, that offer of compensation to a buyer's agent in an offer is not firm and is not guaranteed unless that contract is accepted. So
Suggestion on that method, so if you do have a seller that's paying 2.5, what would your take be on the best method to approach that with buyer agents acquired?
okay, so they're offering 2.5, okay, and it still may be published in BAC. Somebody may be able to see that today still before RMLS. So if that's in the listing contract, you need to go back and say, okay, this changes in 2 days. This changes in 24 hours. Are you still open to 2.5? Because you don't have to. Now, we can revise that offer of compensation. You can even have 0 in it today. But again, tomorrow, that's all gone. So you need to have that conversation and anticipate what you may be asking for from a buyer. You know, they may be asking for 2.5 or 2, or even less, because they may have a buyer's representation agreement. They've already had an amount that the buyer is willing to pay them. So they may only ask for 0.5% to go to that 2.5. or to make up whatever their buyer representation. Again, you cannot take more than your buyer representation agreement amount. So if you sign that at 2 or 2.5, seller's offering 3, you cannot take the extra half a point. Food for thought on that option. See if you can negotiate that half a point as a seller closing cost or a buyer closing cost. Don't leave it on the table. See if that seller would be willing to give that 0.5% in additional closing costs and prepayments. If they're offering that, okay?
Wait, Ashley, did you mean from like a strategic
Yeah.
standpoint? Like
Okay,
what
yeah,
do we
and I'm sorry, I
think?
digress.
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
It's all good information, but
Yeah, it just, and
It's
you
gonna be
can,
hard.
you can tell your seller, and maybe this is the best position for your seller to be in is, let's wait and see. Let's see what somebody presents to us. Because maybe they're not gonna ask for 2.5, maybe they're gonna ask for 1.5. So you may save your sellers a little bit of change on that. What if you're in a multiple offer situation? Those requests for compensation may be all over the board because somebody wants to get that deal done for their buyer. That agent is willing to, take a reduction in hopes that their offer is going to be accepted. So more net to the seller, and the buyer gets in the house or gets the contract accepted. So that's going to be interesting. Think of the attitude. If they're willing to dangle the carrot and they want something quick or they want to compete, then and they're used to that. And historically they say, yeah, I'm okay offering compensation at this amount. Let's just do it. That's fine. But maybe they want to take a wait and see attitude to see what buyer's agents submit. So it just depends on their kind of mindset.
Just a quick, I see more like flyers coming out, like BAC offered, like through emails and stuff, like as far as that goes, like are you putting signs on your for sale sign and like on your flyers, anything else you recommend doing?
You can market a compensation, a BAC, on anything outside of RMLS. You could put it on a flyer, you could put it on your signpost. You could have a standalone website that is exclusively for your 123mainstreet.com. And you could put it there. You can actually do in the private remarks, you can say, call listing agent for seller concessions. You can only use the word concessions. You can't use the word commission or compensation. You can only use concessions, and that can go in the private remarks. So then you can start talking, okay, well, hi, this is Joe. I see you're offering, the seller's offering concessions. Share that with me. Okay, Joe, sure. They're willing to offer up to, 2.2% with a healthy offer. If we get into agreement, or 2.5, or yeah, they're willing to offer something. We'll make that determination once we get an offer. Okay.
I have a question from the chat.
Yeah.
So what happens if our current listings have not signed the addendum after much nagging?
If our current listings
Have not signed the addendum after speaking with them.
they need to have that addendum signed ASAP. I've signed 20 of them in the last 24 hours. That new listing addendum with the change.
so what if the client refuses to
Yeah.
sign it?
I would, boy, there we go. Way to throw a wrench in the works. You need to notate that someplace. If you could get the client to initial that I've refused to sign this. Some sort of acknowledgement that at least you presented it and they have responded in kind. You can't control that. Hopefully, we don't have those scenarios, but it sounds like we may have. But you need to get some sort of acknowledgement, so you have at least that's in your file in case something happens in the future. But, again, these new little scenarios left and right with new challenges that we haven't addressed yet, and we'll address them as they come. So that's interesting. So.
And that's why we're gonna keep talking about this
Yeah.
every week for basically the month of August, because more nuanced things are gonna come out.
Yeah,
every week.
because that's it, that.
And beyond.
In that scenario, they've already agreed to, they're refusing to sign the addendum. Is that what that question was?
Yeah,
Okay, well, they already have a listing agreement amount. All this addendum does is just showcase what the listing agent is gonna be compensated for without any BAC included, so they don't couple that number. So it's just the listing side number, not the BAC or any compensation to be offered in the future. So I would hope that would be pretty easy to sign off on. I mean, but we'll see. Every case is different. So, yeah, and then state your contract should include if the seller contribution will be offered, determine the amount or rate if seller wants to define an amount. Okay, if they want to define an amount, put that in your additional provisions. If they don't, if they just want to keep it open, just saying seller will entertain any potential offers and negotiate at that point. Yes, sir.
So then now do we need a second addendum clarifying what that amount is, being that the previous addendum?
No, you could put that in, well, if it's a new listing contract and that form, those forms, the new listing contracts would be in all the forms platforms tomorrow, sorry, on the 14th. But if I would put that in, if you have an existing one, I would just, you can write whatever you want in the new addendum. Any additional remarks aside from the fee and the fact, the statement that says fees are not set by law and are always negotiable. Whatever your terms, you can include that in as an additional element to your listing contract.
Okay, so do, then if they previously signed the listing agreement, then sign the new addendum that removes the buyer.
Correct.
Adding it back in, so to speak.
Yeah, you can, I mean, if you need to take something out of the original listing contract, a term, a condition, you can do that with the new addendum, or if you need to add a new term, condition, whatever the topic is, you know, that you're willing to offer, you know, by a seller willing to offer compensation, you could put that in that document as well. Okay.
And that's not required, but
It's
you're
not required.
protecting yourself
That's the word.
from them coming
Just
back.
notate,
to say.
notate, just spell it out as clearly as ever, because this is all about transparency. Who's paying who and how much are they getting on both sides of the transaction. So
So this is amending the contract, but not the NMLS.
it's, yeah,
Not
it's,
DMIs.
yeah, it's not in the RMLS. Any reference to buyer compensate, buyer's agent compensation or seller offering any type of compensation is totally removed from RMLS.
And the agents have to do that for current listings.
It's going to be done automatically.
It happened
It's just gonna,
automatically
they're gonna
today.
evaporate.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So, but this is now gonna increase the phone conversations and the talk, you know, reaching out to that listing agent. And hey, what's the seller offering? Are they offering anything? What do I need, you know, what do we need to do? So. A lot more one-on-ones on the phone, so. And then your listing contract has to have a statement in it, which is default that says these listing contracts cannot exceed 24 months. Okay. All right, and then we get to the amending the current contracts, your buyer representation agreement, and we can go through a lot of this too on Thursday at 11 o'clock. Agreements must state prominently that broker commissions are not set by law and are fully negotiable. That amendment should include statement that the compensation paid by the seller or listing agent, I should cross out listing agent, paid by the seller, or that should read probably your co-op, is not allowed to be greater than the fee defined in your buyer representation agreement. Okay. Buyer representation agreement sets a max that you can receive or contractually can receive either from the buyer paying you or from the listing side compensating you. And then the statement that buyer representation agreements cannot exceed 24 months as well. And then, or if buyer rep agreement was modified, made to cover all these points. So it's been updated. And again, we'll go through that on Thursday. There's two different agreements, of course. There's exclusive and non-exclusive. And we can get into the definition of those on Thursday as well. And then I've put up a timeline here of kind of what we're looking at going into this week. Today, RMLS begins removing VAC fields, starting with IDX data feeds. So if you have a third-party, a vendor site that is taking a feed from RMLS, that data, that VAC data will be removed from there as well.
All of your KW sites.
Yeah.
Have that IDX. built in.
Deadline to amend agreements for any active listing stating commission is not set by law and is fully negotiable. So you need to have that statement. Your seller needs to know that statement, as does your buyer. And then on the 14th, VAC completely removed from RMLS. The 17th, NAR practices are required for all realtors. That's a buyer representation agreement, is mandatory. And that's, again, you guys have already been way ahead of the curve. Kelly set you up very nicely on that. You're already practicing that, but that's goes nationwide on the 17th. And then between the 17th and January, basically, Oregon Real Estate Agency Development Rules for compliance of HB 4058, meaning that Oregon law says all representation agreements must be in place before you show property. There was a change a week ago too. At one point, they said you had to have a buyer representation agreement to shoot a video of a property that you were going to send you a potential client. That has been reversed. You don't need a buyer representation agreement to have a video tour.
Overheads are prevailing.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so that's changed.
Yes.
With you.
And they're looking in Oregon, they're also looking in.
Okay.
And they were very stressed about, well, I don't wanna have two buyer broker agreements going at the same time, basically. Is that okay if they have one in California and they have one in Oregon?
Yeah, that you can have one, now, did you sign one here? Is it the exclusive one?
Yes.
Okay, that's
they
fine
like-
for the state of Oregon. They can have a qualified agent to handle their representation in California. That is fine.
Okay.
Yeah. Questions, concerns? Confusion, issues at all?
And so in essence, we're not paying co-op.
Well,
To
yes,
be
that's,
determined.
yes,
but-
that's the seller is really controlling the boat on this one, where what the compensation is. So all the seller's gonna do is pay your compensation as the listing agent. What they pay the buyers is up for grabs,
And that's what we're gonna have to just wait
Based-
and see.
based on
what
what's submitted,
people start doing.
you know. Section 8 in the sale agreement has the request for concessions, whether it's compensation or closing costs for the buyer. And then you submit 048 with that. So that's gonna be conversations first. What are you offering, if anything? What do we need to do? And then have that discussion with the buyer. Hey, they're only offering X, you're on the hook for the balance. Do you understand that? My deal with you is 2.5, they're offering 2. Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, or whatever, you're on the hook for the other 0.5%. Okay,
Or,
Mhm.
oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, there's not a law that says that the buyer broker agreement has to be signed electronically, so we have a date stamp, correct?
all they've stated is you need to have one before you show property.
But what's to keep us, I guess this is the.
I guess there's gonna be
Should I close my ears?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's gonna be like a checkbox, they said, like, when you go to like. Look at the show or book a showing or something online showings, that's gonna say like, do you have a buyer representation agreement? And you have to like check it, so.
Say yes, but this person's offering 3. What signatures look backdated 3 days? I mean, I know that's not totally honest, but what's gonna stop
Mhm.
people that take buyer agreements and say they go low just to get this client? But you come across a listing agent that says, yeah, we're considering 2.25. Why not just have a wet signature backdated a week? So we had that agreement before we started searching, but now I just went from this low percentage to what was being offered.
Some people will try that.
That'll
Yeah,
be
I mean,
that-
you get in trouble when you get caught.
Yeah.
So let's just not get caught doing stuff like that.
In that
Well,
scenario-
I mean, there's not a.
Try not to do it.
like this, yeah.
In that scenario, couldn't she just write a new buyer broker agreement?
You could amend that. There are.
Before you showed something and you found out.
Before, but isn't it,
Well,
that would be a violation.
Let me say this, that kind of goes against the spirit of what all this decision is with DOJ and NAR. Kind of backdating, changing, oh, there's a higher fee there, let's look at that, because this shouldn't be about you and your fee. This is about the buyer and the seller, not us. So, you know, but that fee conversation comes into play with both. But when you're, do I want to use the word steering from one listing to another because it's a higher percentage, that's some murky water there. If someone found out or called you out or investigated or audited you or whatever. Now, I don't think that's gonna happen. There's no police out there, but they are using like AI to look at remarks fields to see if there's trending coding words like, you know, hey, you know, the dollar symbols in the private remarks or things like that. or-
Spell it instead of the numbers.
Yeah, exactly. So, what extent technology is going to be involved with, I don't know. That's not really not our role. Our role is just to manage what the boundaries of rules and regulations are and stay within those boundaries. And try not to go outside of those but, you know, we can't police everybody. We just, you know, this is an ethical entity and an ethical company and an ethical operation here at Portland Premier. And so we're going to continue to go on that path.
You don't have to
Kevin.
file every buyer's contract review.
Yes,
You have to file every
it's a required.
prior to
document.
getting either a contract or, but like if we just go show a property. We have a buyer broker agreement. I have to send it to Joe.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Well,
If
it's-
it never turns into anything.
If it never turns into anything, no, I just keep that in your file. But that's a great question.
Yeah,
Just keep it in your file. Then if you do get mutual agreement and then upload that with your sales
no
documents.
transaction.
Yeah, I think it's in the checklist too, isn't there?
Yeah, it's in the
Says
command.
consultation.
It's in command now under consultation. But
may want to change that. We may want to have those in place as soon as you sign them.
Mhm.
We'll manage that. We'll talk to that, how we want to do that. So I know there's the consultation, under contract and closing, the three
Mhm.
options in command.
Because you have to associate it with a transaction
Yeah.
eventually, right? So, but you should still keep record of that. I don't know, we gotta think about that. in
And we need to
command.
protect you too, because what if you've signed an exclusive BRA and your buyer has another one out there that they haven't shared with you for somebody else? You got to be protected.
Mhm.
And there may be some legal ramifications on that too, especially if you've done 2 months worth of home showing. And all of a sudden, hey, we're not interested. And all of a sudden you see they went to somebody else and bought a house. Especially if you showed that house, you would be
Mhm.
considered the procuring cause. If you showed it and they bought it with another agent.
Mhm.
So,
Mhm. Last question, Austin, did you have one? And then.
yeah,
That answer one. Another one is just to verify, because I've heard it football a couple times, you don't need one when you're hosting an open house, you don't need one to show your own listing, is that correct?
you don't need one at an open house because you are representing the seller in that scenario. Okay, and then you don't need one if you're showing one of your listings.
Is that correct?
That's pretty much the same thing, right? You're opening up your house representing the seller to a potential buyer. Now, of course, if that buyer says, hey, can you represent me? Of course, you need to sign it there. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Good questions.
Yeah, great
Mhm.
questions. And what we can do a lot more on Thursday too, and then we'll just keep doing this. I'm always available. So, shoot me a text, call.
Mhm.
Couple just final notices here. Code of ethics. I know we talked about Lark.
Yes.
Code of ethics, the cycle ends this end of this year. And there's 43 agents at this office that have not gotten their code of ethics done.
Ooh, lucky.
So
you.
there's going to be a couple of classes. There's one in September coming courtesy of PMAR, no charge,
Not me.
2.5 CE.
Just didn't.
It's about a 2.5 hour class, and then there's another one in early December. So I'll post those schedules. You can go to the CE shop, or online ad. You can
Mhm.
pay for it if you want to get it out of the way now, but I'll send a date of the free ones for you. But we need to get that code of ethics, that cycle ends at the end of this year. And then Monday, September 2nd, Labor Day, non-business day. Keep that in mind when you're writing contracts. Okay.
Oh, good nuggets,
Yeah,
Joe.
thank
And Kevin's gonna come up and we're gonna, this meeting's gonna end, the next one's gonna start. We're gonna talk about buyer conversation. So we're kind of gonna continue that conversation of how are we actually putting this into practice? But thanks for keeping us in line. And next time we see you on Tuesday, that'll be fully in effect, but hopefully you'll come to the class on Thursday.
Yep, sounds good. Look forward to seeing you.
Thanks, guys. Have a good day and then stick around if you can. And then Kevin, you are up.